Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of For What It's Nerd. Today, we are discussing Wicked, which came out only a few days ago. I actually watched it yesterday, and yeah, I just wanted to kind of discuss my thoughts on the movie. I have to kind of give some background first, as I try to do with these things, and say, whilst I have enjoyed a number of Oz media, I know Wicked is sort of outside of the actual Oz timeline, it's more fan fiction in a way. Whilst I have read a lot of Oz media and kind of enjoyed Oz media, I am not a Wicked aficionado. I haven't seen the theatre play, I haven't read the Wicked book. Um, but I do have like sort of an understanding. Generally, I did go and kind of research the play a little bit before making this video, reading about the kind of history of the play, the theatre performance, and then kind of the differences as well. And what I found quite interesting was that actually Wicked does not have that many dissimilarities from the stage show, apart from adding stuff, which makes sense. They're making this into a part one and a part two. This first part runs almost as long as the actual theatre play, from what I've gathered. So obviously understandable. It reminds me, funnily enough, and I know this is a game reference, but it reminds me very much of how they've elongated Final Fantasy VII for the remakes. Very different, very different media, very different idea. In terms of game to game rather than theatre to movie, but it's the same sort of principle. When you're elongating something, you have to add something. It can't just be, the one musical number can't just go on for 10 minutes instead. But I've got to say, and I don't cry at many movies. I think we've kind of made this clear. Wicked got me. I think it's a movie that a lot of people can relate to for a number of different reasons, whether it be because of so many things that make you a minority group or ostracized in some way. The main focus of the play is about the movie, even in this instance, is about being different and what that means and how that can be stripped away from you, or how that can empower you. And you see that with Dr. Dillamond, who is the kind of scapegoat, not to be too fine a point on it, for kind of the ideas about animals and animals being losing their voice, which gave me very much Animal Farm vibes, actually. That's all I could think of during, especially the scene where there's a scene in this movie where Dr. Dillamond is talking to a number of other animals, and I feel like that really did give me that idea of Animal Farm. We are more equal. All animals are equal, but we're more equal, so to speak. Or is it animals are more equal, or however they put it? Either way, that's what it felt like. And then you have obviously Elphaba, who's coming from the kind of human perspective to kind of reinforce the image of the animals. Because I think some people can really, and we're kind of really understanding more and more recently that media literacy kind of goes straight over people's heads, and they see it in a movie. They can hear people saying we are being done an injustice, and they don't translate it to the real world and think, oh, that movie was actually about this. They don't get it. And I find that fascinating because a lot of people say, "Oh, movies aren't political. Movies didn't used to be political." And you go back and look at something like, A New Hope, for example, Star Wars, and the whole point of it was political. It was saying, we can't let fascist governments do what they like. And et cetera, et cetera. So I think this movie did a really good job of illustrating its main themes. I think, we do go sometimes into a movie and think, what are the themes of this? Not maybe not your average film goer, but I think a lot of people go, what's the actual takeaway here? What's the lesson? Because I think every film has to have a lesson in some way. It's about growing. Is it about your arrogance? Is it about your patience? Is it about finding family? Is it about learning that the people around you are all equal to you? Or there's loads of different lessons that you're meant to learn from media, not just movies but stories. I mean, that's what stories are. They, if you go back to really like base stories, like the rabbit and the tortoise, the hare and the tortoise, however you want to put it, and the story is slow and steady wins the race. Now obviously that's it's not a broad statement, but it says don't race through life doing like picking the wrong choices, so to speak. Analyze what you're doing, and that is like one of the these moral tales used to be like the big kind of underpinning of storytelling. Look at something like Everyman, very much similar concept. So I feel like Wicked did a really good job of getting its themes through. And do you know what I think it really did a good job of? And I think you could have done it very easily where you didn't make it this, but they did a really good job of showing that someone like Glinda, who arguably is a person who is self-absorbed, comes out of that into someone who is kind of a bit more caring about Glinda, and then to Glinda. And you can see that she begins to care about people, and that she begins to care about the things around her, but then ultimately still sort of backs out of that. And I think that's a really interesting character to put to screen, because a lot of the time what you see, and for example, this is a really weird example, but it's the only example that comes straight to mind. I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy XIV for a number of years now. I am Final Fantasy XIV. Again, another Final Fantasy reference, but here you go. A lot of the characters will, even the most heinous of characters, will have a complete 180 halfway through their story. And it just seems unrealistic to me. You know, you have a lot more nuance in people. You know, Elphaba, again, the other side of the coin. Elphaba starts out sort of standoffish, comes out of that, becomes someone that can kind of, starts to understand and kind of get along with the people around her. And then there's a breaking point where she says, well, actually, no, I'm not going to get along with you if you don't believe in the things that I believe in. And I think those two characters against each other are really phenomenal, because you see, again, as I've just kind of pointed out, you've got like your 1, 2, 3, and you've got your other way where it's like 1, 2, 3. They meet in that middle part. Like it's like one goes up and over and one goes down and up, and they meet, and they that's their kinship, but then they diverge, and it's really interesting to see how their paths cross and then uncross, so to speak. And I'm very excited to see how because obviously, I know that this part 2 will be the play again. It will take very heavily from the play. I'm excited to see that put to the screen, because I honestly, this movie was great, and there was some awkward parts. I think some of the singing, I've got to be honest, I think wasn't for me, and I'm not saying that in a cruel way. I think Ariana Grande is a very obviously has been a popular singer for many years now. Cynthia Erivo, I'm not obviously as aware of. This is the first movie I think I've seen Cynthia in, if I'm being completely honest, but powerful voice as well. And actually my favorite numbers were Cynthia's, The Wizard and I and Defying Gravity. Not that I'm holding a space for that necessarily. Some of you will get that joke, some of you won't. But I think some parts were just like, I was like, especially the first part I found where the Munchkins were singing about Elphaba's death, and you have Glinda singing as well. I did not understand a single line, a single note of what Glinda was saying. And that was kind of frustrating to me. I know they're releasing a sing-along version, so that would probably be... I would actually almost wish that they had subtitles for the music in the film. I feel like during certain parts it would have really helped me personally. But then again, I imagine most of the music is very similar to what's already been on stage. Again, I'm not 100% certain on that. So for a lot of people, they will already have had the shorthand. They will already know this music going in. So understandable in that way too. So... that is Glinda and Elphaba. I think they were really well characterized throughout. Again, the strongest characters in there. And that's kind of to be expected, right? Your main characters are usually your strongest characters. But there's many places where people actually like the side characters more than the main characters. And I've had that a number of times. But in this, I do think it's the main characters who really shine the most. Especially because I feel like Jeff Goldblum, and I love Jeff Goldblum, by the way, before we get into this, I do love Jeff Goldblum. But I think he was playing himself again here. And sometimes that works really well. But I wanted a little bit more. I was waiting for him to get a little bit more sinister. I was waiting for a little bit more, like a little bit more of an underlying kind of cruelty. And I know he can do it because I haven't watched it, but I know that Chaos came out not long ago where he was playing Zeus, right? He was playing the gods. And you could see in that he was a little bit more, there was like a cruelty in that, in like a few of those clips that I'd seen. So I really wanted him to bring a little bit more cruelty in those last two scenes. The one who kind of picked up the slack on that was Madame Morrible, Michelle Yeoh. But my issue is, again, I've seen Michelle Yeoh play a better villain, and that was in Star Trek as Emperor Georgiou. A lot better, way better. And I just think I could have done with a little bit more of the underhandedness, the cruelty that I've seen both these actors do elsewhere. A little bit stronger. Now, funnily enough, there is another link I'm going to make with Final Fantasy and Wicked, which is Jonathan Bailey. Now, Jonathan Bailey is a really interesting actor because he is also, well, to me, because he is also a voice of one of the characters from Final Fantasy XIV as well. He plays one of the main characters, Graha Tia, who is a big fan favorite. And I find it really interesting that you've got this kind of actor who has a distinct vocal range, because you have to have a vocal range for voice acting. It has some really good scenes in Final Fantasy with that character. And then I felt like he wasn't super there in this. The one scene I will say was quite good was him and Fiero and Alphaba. That was quite good when they were saving the Lion Cub. That was good. I liked that. I'm hoping in kind of part 2 they give him a little bit more room to kind of breathe as a character, because I feel like he was very much an attachment to Glinda, which I suppose you're meant to feel, right? You're meant to feel that Fiero is this attachment to Glinda as you know, Alphaba's saying about he might be that boy, but I'm not that girl, and I think that was kind of probably the implication, right? But yeah, I think generally, I think the supporting cast was not necessarily as great as, and that goes as well for Bok and Nessa Rose. I don't think they were necessarily strong from an acting standpoint. Obviously, a very interesting cast, and I think they were all well picked. I just think, do I feel as strongly for those characters as I do Alphaba and Glinda? No, I don't. Not currently. But I think obviously that'll change, because I feel like I've read a little bit into the story for 2, like what would be part 2, and I think it'll be interesting. So we'll come back. We'll circle back around into this in a year's time, for sure. Otherwise, I've got to say, and I know a lot of people are talking about the show, the movie being saturated in parts. I didn't really notice that this year myself. I thought it looked pretty good. I think I kind of understand why they were. I actually read something from John. Is it John M. Chu, the director, and who said like we saturated a little bit because we didn't want this world to feel. I forget how he put it, but it was something like we didn't want this world to feel so alive and bright before Dorothy gets there, or something like that. So you might see a little bit more of a difference in part 2. But I personally didn't see an issue anyway, and I think that most of even the CGI, by the way, because I know they didn't do a lot of CGI, they did actually build a lot of this, but the CGI atop that was, in my opinion, well done, and didn't look too. It looked what you would expect for Oz, and I think that's the thing, right? Oz looks slightly on that unreal, uncanny spectrum, because that's kind of what it's meant to be. Oz has always been that. Every time you watch a Wizard of Oz movie or anything Wizard of Oz, like, you get that kind of sense of just slightly. It's just slightly two degrees right of our reality, right? So I personally really enjoyed it, and the iconography, the Easter eggs, that you can see the attention to detail. I mean, even as someone who hadn't watched the theater performance before, you could see watching it. I was watching it, and I could see where they'd taken deep inspiration from it. You could tell from like some of the outfitting and some of the gesturing, and even, for example, Ariana Grande's physicality really reminded me of, is it Kristen Chenoweth? That's the name, right? Yeah, who played Glinda initially, because I've seen Kristen in other things. A few things, but not loads. But I've seen her in You Again, which is a movie featuring Betty White, funnily enough, as well, and Kirsten Bell, however you say it. I'm ruining names today. And in that, very similar physicality. So you can see how Ariana tried to bring Kristen forth into her character with Glinda. Not so much. I don't know so much about Idina Menzel. Again, the names, I'm getting them all wrong. The original Alphabet. I should know that name because she also did Frozen. Sorry, I don't know why. Idina Menzel. Either way. And Yeah, so I think I don't know so much about that, but I think there's definitely a case of paying forward the theatre performance. And I think they definitely, Cynthia and Ariana took a lot on board from what the play was to bring into the movie, and you can see that. You can definitely see that. But yeah, I think it was a very fun experience. It has me wanting to get back into the Oz world, not just the Wicked world, but like the Oz world as well. So if a movie does that, if a movie generally wants you to like kind of dive into that world more, I think it's done its job. I think it's succeeded in some way or another. And like my For You page on TikTok is filled with Oz stuff. And one thing I think is very important, I actually bought tickets for the wrong day when I got there, and I had to buy new tickets. And it was very difficult because there was a lot of people like sitting those lines. Like I haven't seen that many people waiting to go into a movie. Not that many people, but many people waiting to go into a movie since Endgame. Like, not saying that that's I don't usually go to premieres as much as I used to, so I might be like a little bit out of whack, out of like sync with like others that I've been to. But I saw a lot of people. Like my theater was packed for Endgame, like outside of the theater as well, like in the foyer. And this time around, not packed, but very busy, very busy. And a lot of people were talking about how important this movie was to them. And so clearly, this is a movie that's gonna. I think it's gonna have legs. I think it's gonna go really far, and I think a lot of people are already excited for part 2. So well worth the watch. It is a 3-hour watch, but it doesn't feel like 3 hours at all. So I'm going to leave it there for now, guys. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. If you did, let me know as always. I shall speak to you guys again soon. Thank you for listening and watching as always. Bye, guys.